The waitress hid behind a stranger in line, not knowing he was the mafia boss with 11 guards. It was past midnight, which meant North Cross belonged to the rain and the rats. The city did not sleep. It just fermented under a blanket of humidity and desperation. I was standing under the flickering neon sign of a 24/7 convenience store, the green light sputtering, casting 6 shadows on the wet pavement. My stomach felt like it was full of hot gravel. Mr. Henderson, my manager at the Blue Comet Diner, had cut my shift 4 hours early. It was the 3rd time this week, a blatant, illegal retaliation because I was the one who had finally filed a complaint with the labor board. My hands were shaking. It was not from the cold, though the late October chill was sharp enough to feel like needles in my skin. It was the rage, the useless, burning rage of being powerless. All I wanted was a box of antacids. I pushed inside. The bell above the door gave a weak, tired jingle. The fluorescent lights hummed a high-pitched, agonizing tune. I grabbed the small green box, $4.99 I could not really spare, and got in line. There were 3 people ahead of me. A woman in nurse's scrubs who looked exhausted, an old man buying a single can of soup, and a tall man in a charcoal overcoat. The bell did not jingle this time. It slammed against the glass door frame as 2 men shoved their way in. They brought the smell of wet wool, stale beer, and something metallic, like old pennies. They were not shoppers. They were the harbor jackals, even if I had not recognized the crude anchor tattoo peeking from the collar of the thicker one. I would have known the type. They moved with a lazy arrogance, like they owned the air everyone else was just borrowing. They ignored the line, swaggering straight to the kid behind the counter, who looked maybe 17. "Hey, Sammy," the big one sneered, his voice a wet rasp. He leaned over the counter, invading the kid's space. "Your boss forget the monthly donation to the Harbor Safety Fund." The kid, Sammy, went pale. He said he paid. Mick, he said he paid on the 1st. "He paid late," the second one, leaner and strung tight as a wire, hissed, "and the late fee is interest plus inconvenience." He punctuated the word by sweeping a dozen packs of expensive cigarettes from the display into his jacket pocket. Mick, the big one, laughed, then he turned, his eyes scanned the line, dismissed the nurse and the old man, and landed on me. His face, slick with rain, twisted into a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Well, look at this. Evie March, the little diner bird." My blood did not just go cold, it turned to slush. The gravel in my stomach ignited. "You're the one who likes making calls." "Right," he said, taking a step toward me, away from the counter. "Calling the labor board on your boss, causing problems for honest men." "He was stealing my overtime," I said. My voice was tight, thin. "He was managing." Mick snapped. He took another step. I backed up. My shoulder blade hit the metal rack of cheap candy bars, sending a few flying, the cold glass of the store window pressed against my other side. I was trapped. The nurse and the old man, seeing what was happening, abandoned their items and scrambled for the door, vanishing into the night. I was alone with them, except for the man in the charcoal coat. He had not moved. He was still standing first in line, his back to me, facing the counter as if nothing was happening. I did not think. I just reacted. It was pure instinct, the animal brain taking over. I lunged forward the one step I had and pressed myself against his back, using him as a human shield. My face was buried in the wool of his coat. My hands grabbed the fabric of his sleeves. He was solid, like a stone pillar, and he was warm through the heavy, expensive fabric. I could feel an intense, radiating heat. A scent cut through the store's stale air of old coffee and bleach. It was clean, sharp, wood smoke and cool mint. "Get out of the way, old man," Mick snarled at the man's back. He raised a thick, scarred hand to shove him. That was when I noticed them. My panic had narrowed my vision, but now, peering around the man's shoulder, I saw the store was not empty. Besides the man I was clinging to, there were others. A man reading the ingredients on a bag of chips with unnatural focus. another studying the labels in the energy drink cooler, a woman flipping through a magazine, 2 men near the entrance, pretending to look at the lottery scratchers. They were all dressed in dark, simple, functional clothes. They looked like casual, random shoppers, invisible and unimportant. But they were not. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. My eyes kept moving. 7, 8, 11, and there were 11 other people in the store. And as I watched, I realized every single one of them was positioned perfectly. They were standing in the exact spots the domed security mirror in the corner could not see. They were all standing in the camera's blind spots. Mick, the jackal, did not notice the 11. He only saw the obstacle in front of him. I said, "Move," he shouted, and he swung his arm back to shove. The man in the charcoal coat did not turn around. He did not brace himself. He just tilted his head slightly, a fractional movement, as if listening to a distant sound. His voice was deep, perfectly quiet, yet it filled the entire store, silencing the hum of the lights. It was like gravel wrapped in velvet. "There are rules to a queue," he said. The jackal froze, his hand still poised to strike. The air in the store did not just get quiet, it died. It became a vacuum. The man continued, his voice perfectly level, almost bored. "You just cut." The lean jackal looked nervous. "What did you say?" The man in the charcoal coat made a gesture with his left hand, the one I was not clinging to. It was barely a movement. He simply brushed his thumb against his first 2 fingers, as if wiping away a speck of dust. Instantly, the store's geography shifted. The 11 shoppers moved. It was not aggressive. It was not a fight. It was orchestral. The man at the chip aisle turned, his body blocking the path to the medication. The woman at the magazine rack took 2 steps to her left, sealing the aisle with the soda refrigerators. The 2 men at the door simply turned, their presence becoming a solid wall. No one pulled a weapon. No one raised their voice. They just moved. They repositioned, creating a perfect, inescapable box around the 2 jackals, using the store's own aisles against them. It was done in absolute, terrifying silence. The lean jackal saw it first. His eyes darted from one new position to the next, doing the math and coming up short. His bravado evaporated, replaced by the sour stink of fear. Mick looked confused. Then he looked trapped, the oppressive weight of 11 silent, focused people pressed in on them from all sides. "I believe it is my turn to pay," the man in charcoal said, finally turning to the counter. He looked past the jackals as if they were furniture. He placed a crisp $50 bill on the counter. "For my items and for the young lady's medicine." He nodded at my hand, which was still clutching the green box. He then glanced at the items left on the conveyor belt by the nurse and the old man who had fled, and for theirs as well. He looked at the trembling kid behind the register. "Ring it all up. We must preserve the rules of the queue." It was a joke, a terrifying, lethally polite joke made in the middle of a shakedown. The kid fumbled, his hands shaking worse than mine as he scanned the items. The jackals, seeing their moment, seeing the invisible cage part just slightly, backed away. The wall of 11 people opened just enough for them to scramble through, shoving each other to get out the door first. The bell jangled wildly as they fled into the rain. The store was silent again, but the air was charged, vibrating. The 11 shoppers returned to their browsing as if nothing had happened. I let go of the man's coat. My knuckles ached. "Thank you," I whispered. My voice was barely audible. He finally turned to look at me fully. His face was sharp, angular, with a strong jaw and eyes the color of steel. He was not smiling, but he was not angry. He just was. He studied me for a long second, his gaze clinical, analytical, taking in my frayed diner uniform and the shake in my hands. The kid slid my antacids and the man's purchase a single, black glass bottle of mineral water across the counter, along with a pile of change. The man ignored the change. He reached into the breast pocket of his overcoat and pulled out a business card. It was thick, heavy stock, matte black. The lettering was simple, embossed in silver. Belanti and Company, Redevelopment. There was no phone number, no address, just a name and a function. He held it out to me. I took it. The card was cold and rigid. "Next time," he said, his voice still that low, smooth rumble, "do not stand at the back of the line alone." He picked up his water, nodded once to the cashier, and walked out. The bell gave a polite, respectful jingle. The 11 other shoppers evaporated, one by one, in perfect, silent succession. They placed their items back on the shelves and filed out the door, melting into the North Cross night like ghosts in the rain. I stood there for a full minute, the business card in one hand and the antacids in the other. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt, a physical pain beneath my ribs that had nothing to do with my stomach. I pushed the door open and stepped back out into the downpour. The rain felt colder now. I clutched the small box of medicine, my knuckles white. I looked down at the card again. Belanti and Company. Redevelopment. My chest felt tight, constricted, as if I could not get a full breath. I was grateful to the stranger, to the man who smelled of wood smoke and mint, the man who commanded a room with a whisper and a flick of his fingers. But as I hurried down the slick, empty sidewalk, back toward my cold apartment, I could not shake the feeling of dread. I did not know who Soren Belanti was. I had no idea that I had just used the most dangerous man in North Cross, the head of the Belanti syndicate, as a human shield. I just knew that I had touched a kind of power I never knew existed, and I was terrified it had just touched me back. The rain from last night had dried into a greasy film over North Cross by 8 a.m. The Blue Comet Diner smelled of old coffee grounds and bacon fat. I clocked in, my stomach already churning. Though the antacids had done their job, I had only been wiping down the vinyl counter for 5 minutes when Mr. Henderson called me into his cramped office. He did not look up from his ledger. "March, close the door." I did. The room was closet-sized, smelling of stale cigars and desperation. He slid a piece of paper across his desk. It was typed, full of dense legal jargon, but the heading was clear. Voluntary reduction of hours agreement. "I am not signing that," I said. My voice was quiet, but it did not shake. "Yes, you are." He finally looked at me, his eyes small and flat, like 2 dull pennies. "You sign that, admitting you requested fewer hours for personal reasons, or you are fired. Cause for termination insubordination. Take your pick." "This is illegal. Mr. Henderson. This is retaliation for the labor board filing." "This," he said, tapping the paper with a sausage-thick finger, "is your last chance. You are causing trouble. Evie. People do not like trouble." People. He meant the harbor jackals, the men from the convenience store. My boss was paying them protection, and part of that protection, apparently, was making sure his staff stayed quiet about him stealing their wages. "I need the hours," I said, the words tight in my throat. "Then you should have kept your mouth shut." He pushed the cheap ballpoint pen toward me. I stared at it. If I signed, I could not pay my rent. If I did not sign, I could not pay my rent. It was the illusion of choice, and it tasted like ash. The bell on the diner door chimed, sharp and clear, saving me from answering. It chimed again, and again, and again, a steady, rhythmic influx of customers. "Get out there and take the orders," Henderson snapped, annoyed by the interruption. I pushed out of the office, the unsigned paper clutched in my hand. I shoved it deep into my apron pocket. Then I froze. The diner was full. In the span of 30 seconds, every booth and every counter stool had been occupied. It was them, the 11. They were not last night's ghosts. They were in matching, subtle gray suits, charcoal ties. Looking like a high-level corporate retreat had just stepped in for breakfast. They were quiet, orderly, and perfectly dispersed. One man in the corner booth, 2 at the booth by the kitchen, 1 at the window, 2 more at the counter. They controlled every line of sight, every entrance, every exit. Then he walked in. Soren Belanti? He wore the same charcoal overcoat as last night, dry now, perfectly pressed. The scent of wood smoke and mint cut through the smell of the grease trap. a clean incision in the heavy air. He ignored the booths and slid onto the last stool at the counter, right in my section. I grabbed a coffee pot, my movements stiff, robotic. "Welcome to the Blue Comet," and I mumbled, "Coffee." "Black," he said. His voice was the same deep, quiet velvet that had stopped a man's fist 12 hours earlier. I poured. My hand was shaking again, the memory of Henderson's office and the sight of these men colliding. A small splash of hot coffee hit the counter. I winced, grabbing a rag to wipe it up. He watched me, and he did not look at Henderson, who was peering suspiciously from his office door. He did not look at the kitchen, or at the other men. He just watched my hands as I cleaned the spill. "You are shaking," he observed. It was not a question or an accusation. It was a statement of fact. "Long night," I whispered, not looking at him. "It seems like a long morning." He looked down at the black coffee I had poured. He pushed the white ceramic sugar dispenser toward it, then stopped, leaving his hand on the counter, inches from mine. "Your coffee needs sugar," he said, his voice dropping so low that only I could hear it over the diner's hum. "Your life needs boundaries." My breath hitched. He knew. He'd not been in the office, but he knew. He was talking about Henderson, about the paper in my pocket. Before I could process the implication, my apron buzzed. The vibration was violent against my hip. I pulled out my cheap smartphone. A text from an unknown number. "Drop the complaint or your brother gets hurt." My blood did not just go cold, it evaporated. My brother, Liam, he was 26, lived 3 states away, worked in a warehouse, and he was fine. He was an adult, he was safe. But the thought of those men, the harbor jackals, even knowing his name, it was a violation that stole my breath. The coffee pot in my hand suddenly weighed 100 pounds. My grip on my cleaning rag tightened, my knuckles turning white. I could not breathe. It felt like the store last night, the walls closing in, my options narrowing to a single, sharp point of panic. Soren Belanti did not look at my phone. He was watching my hands. He saw the grip, the shallow, rabbit-fast rise and fall of my shoulders. He slid his hand from the counter and placed something small on the formica. It was a small silver disc, brushed metal, no bigger than a quarter. It looked like a high-end cufflink, but there was no backing. It was sleek, minimalist, and cold. "You seem to find yourself in spaces where the lines are blurred," he said quietly, his voice a steady anchor in my rising panic. "Call me when a boundary is crossed." It was not a phone. It was a button, a panic button. "I cannot accept this," I whispered, pushing it back. He did not move. He did not let me push it back. "It is not a request," he said, his steel gray eyes meeting mine. "It is a tool. You know how to use tools." A roar of an engine outside made me jump, spilling more coffee. A rusty blue pickup truck, the kind the jackals favored, swerved to the curb, tires screeching. We all saw it. The driver, Mick from last night, leaned out. He had a can of spray paint. With a lazy, arrogant motion, he painted a crude symbol on the diner's front window, an anchor crossed with a broken bone, a jackal sigil, a mark of ownership, a public threat. Henderson burst from his office, his face purple. "What the? They cannot do that. That's vandalism." Soren Belanti did not even turn to look at the window. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his black coffee. He set the cup down. The clink of porcelain on the counter, the only sound in the suddenly silent diner. "Evie," he said. I stared at him, my heart rattling against my ribs like a trapped bird. "That window," he asked, his voice calm, "is it leased property or your property?" It belongs to the landlord," I stammered. "Mr. Henderson just leases the space." "And the landlord," Soren continued, "is he aware of the clientele his tenant keeps?" "He is," I said, the words bitter. "He gets a cut. He's the one who introduced Henderson to the jackals in the first place." Soren nodded, as if I had just confirmed a simple fact, like the time, "Then let the landlord pay the price." He took another sip of coffee. He did not make a phone call. He did not send a text. He did not look at any of his 11 men. He just sat there, an island of perfect stillness. I waited. The diner was silent except for the clinking of silver as the 11 gray-suited men began to eat the breakfasts I had not yet served them. 1 minute passed, 2. On the 3rd minute, we heard it, the loud, unmistakable thump-thump hiss of a heavy tow truck deploying its lift, right outside the front door. Henderson ran to the window, peering past the wet blue spray paint. "What the hell, that is a city tow. They are hooking up Mr. Akers' Mercedes. He is parked legally. He is in a loading zone." Soren signaled to me for a refill. I grabbed the pot, my hand steadier this time. "The meter expired," Soren said, so quietly I almost did not hear him. "At 8:15 this morning, it is now 8:19. We watched as the landlord's gleaming black Mercedes was hoisted unceremoniously into the air, its front wheels dangling and driven away down the street. A small, perfect act of bureaucratic violence, order of a kind, had been restored. I understood. This was his power. It was not the clumsy brawling of the jackals. It was soft, it was invisible, and it was absolute. It was the power to know which meter was expiring and to have the truck waiting. It was terrifying, far more terrifying than a fist, because it was a power that moved like velvet. Soren Belanti finished his coffee. He placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter. "For the staff," he said, his voice just loud enough for Henderson to hear. He stood up. The 11 men stood with him, in perfect silent unison. They left their own cash on their tables, more than enough to cover their meals. "One of my men," Soren said, nodding to a suit by the door, "will wait outside to see you home safely." "No," I said, surprising myself with the force of the word. "Thank you, but no, I cannot." I could not be seen with these men. I was already in trouble for calling the labor board. Being seen with, whatever this was a different, deeper kind of trouble. I had to draw my own line. Soren studied me. He was not offended. He seemed to understand. "Boundaries," he said. "A simple statement of fact." He nodded once. "The tool remains." He slid the silver button across the counter. It stopped just at the edge, waiting for me. Then he and his team were gone. The diner felt huge and empty and infinitely more dangerous without them. I survived the rest of the shift. Henderson stayed in his office, brooding. The spray paint stayed on the window, a stain. At 4 p.m., I clocked out. The unsigned paper was still in my pocket, folded into a small, tight square. The silver button was in my other pocket, its metal warmed by my body, heavy as an anchor. I walked out the back door, into the alley that led to the staff parking lot. The sun was starting to dip, and the air was getting cold again, the concrete smelling of damp. I saw it from 50 feet away. My car, a 15-year-old sedan that barely ran, the paint faded and peeling. And on the driver's side door, freshly painted in the same wet-looking blue paint, the anchor, the broken bone. They had marked me. They had been here. They had waited for me. They knew which car was mine. I looked around the alley, empty, but the dumpsters cast long, deep shadows. The fire escapes looked like teeth. Every window felt like an eye. The boundary had not just been crossed, it had been erased. I shoved my hand into my apron pocket, my fingers wrapping around the cold, smooth metal disc. My thumb found the center of the button, and I pressed. The second my thumb depressed the cold silver, the alley exploded. It was not a sound, but a movement. The heavy steel back door of the diner slammed open, crashing against the brick wall with a sound like a gong. I had not even heard it unlatch. The shadows I had been staring at, the ones by the dumpster and the recessed service entrance, detached themselves from the walls. It was the 11. They moved from total stillness to a dead sprint in a single heartbeat, their gray suits a blur in the dim, wet air. They did not run at me. They ran around me. In 2 seconds, they had formed a moving tunnel, a phalanx of bodies shielding me from the alley entrance and the unseen windows above. Soren Belanti was at the mouth of this human corridor, walking toward me. He was not running. His pace was a controlled, measured stride that devoured the pavement. The rain had started again, a cold, sharp mist that slicked his dark hair. He reached me, his hand closing around my upper arm. The grip was not violent, it was absolute. It was the grip of a man moving a priceless, fragile object from one secure location to another. "Walk, Evie. Do not run." His voice cut through my panic. We moved. I was in the eye of the storm, surrounded by the quiet thunder of his men's footsteps on the asphalt. I heard a shout from the parking lot behind us. "Hey, stop!" It was the jackals. They had been waiting, hidden. Soren did not look back. He did not slow. He just applied steady pressure to my arm, guiding me toward the street. "Keep moving." We reached the curb. A black sedan was idling there. So clean it looked wet. It appeared to be a standard luxury car, anonymous and expensive. But when Soren pulled the rear door open, I heard the sound it made. It was not a click. It was a heavy, pressurized thunk, like a vault opening. The door itself was at least 4 inches thick. It was an armored car, disguised as civilian. "Get in," he said, his hand flat on my back, urging me forward. "Stay low, away from the glass." I scrambled in. The interior smelled of clean leather and that same faint scent of mint. Soren slid in beside me, his presence filling the small space. The door slammed shut with a heavy, final ka-chunk, sealing us in. The sound of the city, the rain, the shouting jackals, it all vanished, muffled into a distant whisper. The last of his men piled into 2 other black cars that had materialized behind us. We pulled away from the curb, not with a screech, but with a smooth, powerful surge of acceleration. I twisted, looking out the back window. The glass was thick, laminated, distorting the streetlights into long streaks. A motorcycle, loud and stripped down, roared out of the alley. It was painted that same flat, ugly blue as the graffiti, the anchor and bone symbol visible on its tank. The rider wore a black helmet with a dark visor, and he wove through the 4 o'clock traffic with suicidal skill. "He is following us," I said, my voice sounding thin and small in the quiet cabin. "Yes," Soren said. He was not looking back. He was looking forward, his face a mask of calm. We hit a red light at the intersection of 4th and Tremor. The city, oblivious, stopped. The motorcycle filtered through the cars, pulling up 2 vehicles behind us. Its engine was a low, angry growl I could feel through the floor of the sedan. The red light washed over the car's interior, painting everything in a dark, bloody crimson. Soren was perfectly still, watching his side view mirror. The light caught the angle of his jaw, the hard line of his throat. He tilted his head slightly, and the shadow shifted. I saw it. It was a scar, a thin, silvery white line. Not a jagged tear from a brawl, but a precise, surgical-looking mark. It started just below his ear, traced the hard line of his jaw, and disappeared into the collar of his pristine white shirt, heading down toward his collarbone. It was a single, perfect flaw, a piece of his past, exposed for 1 second in the red glare. The light turned green. The sedan did not accelerate. It launched. I was pressed back into the plush leather. The driver did not go straight. He took a hard, sudden right, cutting across a lane and onto the service ramp for the old Tremor Bridge. "This bridge is closed," I said, grabbing the leather strap above the door. "The city shut it down months ago. The cameras are broken." "Exactly," Soren said. The bridge was a skeleton of rust-red steel, spanning the dark, choppy water of the North Cross River. The rain was heavier out here, hammering the roof and the armored glass with a sound like thrown gravel. The motorcycle was still behind us, closer now, its single headlight a furious, bright eye. Soren did not speak to his driver. He simply tapped his middle finger, once, against the armored window. The driver nodded. Ahead of us, coming from the opposite direction, 2 massive green sanitation trucks were crawling toward us, North Cross Sanitation. They were huge, lumbering, and blocking both lanes. "How are they on a closed bridge?" I whispered. The motorcycle rider saw them. He saw his path narrowing. He gunned his engine, trying to surge past us on the left before the trucks reached him. At that exact moment, our driver tapped the brakes. Not a hard stop, just a sudden deceleration. The rider was forced to brake hard, his rear tire locked up, skidding with a high-pitched scream on the bridge's wet steel grating. He did not crash. He was too good for that, but he found himself trapped. Our car was in front of him. The two sanitation trucks, moving in perfect parallel, had closed the gap, their massive steel bumpers inches from his handlebars. He was boxed in, a steel cage on a rusty bridge. Our car accelerated, leaving him there. I looked back. The sanitation trucks had stopped, their yellow lights flashing, completely blocking the bridge. The rider was dismounting, trapped and furious, kicking his tire. "Accidents happen," Soren said, his voice flat, "especially in the rain." I was breathing hard, my lungs burning, as if I had been the one running. You just... "When they cut off your escape route," Soren said, his gray eyes finally meeting mine in the dim light of the cabin, "I make a new lane." We drove for another 10 minutes, into a part of the city I never visited, the old industrial sector, a graveyard of forgotten brick warehouses. The driver pulled into an unmarked alley, and a corrugated steel gate rolled up, silent as a whisper. We drove inside, into darkness. The gate rolled shut behind us, plunging us into pitch black before floodlights snapped on, illuminating a massive, cavernous space. It smelled of ozone, dust, and something sharp, like sulfur. "Where are we?" "The Glass Lantern," and he said, getting out of the car. "It is an artisanal fabrication studio, or it was, now. It is a property of the North Cross Redevelopment Trust." His legal cover. The front of the building was a dusty, forgotten showroom for hand-blown glass. The back, where we were, was a fortress of polished concrete and reinforced steel, vast and open, rising 3 stories to a ceiling of industrial skylights. The rain hammered on the glass roof, a deafening, isolating sound. "You will stay here," he said, leading me toward a spiral staircase. "These are the rules. 1, no social media. Your phone is a beacon. You will use a device I provide. 2, no fixed schedule. You do not wake up at 7 in the morning. You do not eat lunch at noon. Routine is a vulnerability. 3, always change your perspective. Never stand in front of the same window twice in one day." He was giving me the rules of a new life, a life in hiding. We reached the loft, a stunning, minimalist apartment suspended above the main floor. He walked to a concrete console by the wall. He took off the heavy charcoal overcoat underneath. He wore a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing strong, capable hands. He kicked off his polished, expensive shoes, and then he did something that seemed jarringly intimate. He wore a single ring on his right pinky finger. It was not gemstone, just a heavy, thick band of dark, brushed metal that looked ancient. He twisted it, pulling it slowly from his finger. He dropped it into a heavy brass tray. The sound it made, a quiet, final click of metal on metal, echoed in the huge space. He turned, and I realized he was standing barefoot on the cold, polished concrete floor. The man who commanded armored cars and phantom sanitation trucks, the man with the scar and the 11 shadows, was standing barefoot in a dusty art studio, his guard finally, fractionally, down. One of his men, the driver, approached, holding out a tablet. "Sir, it is circulating." Soren took it. As he read, his face, which had softened, hardened again. "What is it?" I asked. He turned the screen to me. It was an internal memo, marked Confidential. At the top, a seal, Metropolitan Organized Crime Directorate, MOCD. "I have never heard of them," I said. "They do not exist," Soren said, his voice tight with a cold anger I had not heard before. "It is a fiction. A rival is using a ghost agency to spread rumors that my organization is targeting civic infrastructure. Why? To draw real attention." He tapped another icon on the screen. This leak was just forwarded to the Federal Revenue Integrity Task Force, FRIT. Are they real? Very. They are the ones who audit large-scale urban renewal projects, like my redevelopment trust. He lowered the tablet. This is an attempt to force them to look under my legal cover, to look for other business. And you, Evie, are the lever. My stomach turned to ice. Me, I am a waitress. You are a documented, credible civilian who filed a state complaint against an establishment paying protection money. You were then publicly threatened, and now you have been extracted by me. He stepped closer. You are the human interest story they will use to justify tearing my legitimate work apart. He was not reassuring me, and he was not making false promises. He was just giving me the facts. I am not asking you to trust me, and he said, his steel gray eyes holding mine. I am offering you preservation, the jackals, and whoever is behind this. See you as a pawn to be sacrificed. I see you as an asset to be secured. Stay here, and your freedom, your choices, are preserved. They are not taken away by a man with a can of spray paint or a fake government memo. He was not offering safety. He was offering agency. I looked around the vast, cold, beautiful space. The rain on the glass roof sounded like 1,000 voices whispering. I was a prisoner, but I had already been a prisoner in my own life. This was just a different kind of cage, a much stronger one. Okay, I said, my voice quiet but steady, temporarily. Okay. The days at the Glass Lantern were long and quiet. They were defined by the sound of the rain on the high glass roof and the smell of ozone. Soren was gone most of the day, managing his visible empire of redevelopment. I was left alone, but not truly alone. One of his men, quiet and unobtrusive, would remain on the ground floor, ostensibly cataloging old glass inventory, but his presence was a clear line of security. I could not just sit in the loft. The inactivity was a different kind of prison. Worse, in some ways, than the fear. On the second day, I went downstairs. The main floor was filled with massive wooden work tables, covered in a fine layer of dust and stacked with heavy sheets of colored glass. There were old sketches tacked to the walls, faded blueprints for stained glass windows, and tools laid out in precise, forgotten rows. I found a T-square and a roll of drafting paper. I picked up a charcoal pencil. My hand, which had trembled holding a coffee pot for the last 6 months, was surprisingly steady as it rested on the clean white paper. I began to draw, not just random doodles, but plans. I drew the arched entrance of the warehouse, correcting the angles I could see, figuring out how the load was distributed. I had not done this in 3 years, not since I had to drop out of the North Cross architecture program, crushed by the $50,000 in student loan debt I had acquired in just 2 semesters. Seeing the clean, logical lines form on the paper felt like finding a piece of my own spine I thought I had lost. He returned late in the afternoon. I did not hear him come in. The steady drumming of the rain covered his approach. I just felt a shift in the air, a subtle drop in temperature by the door. I looked up. He was standing perhaps 20 feet away, still in his charcoal overcoat, watching me. I tensed, my hand freezing on the paper. He did not move closer. He just observed. His steel gray eyes were not looking at me, but at my work. He looked at the T-square, at the precise way my fingers held the charcoal stick, at the confident lines on the page. He noticed how I bit my lips slightly when I was calculating an angle in my head. He saw the precision. He stayed for maybe a full minute, then turned and went up the spiral stairs to the loft. He did not compliment the drawing. He did not question it. He just registered it. This became our routine. I worked on the drafting tables downstairs. He worked in the loft. We were 2 separate islands, connected only by the vast, shared space and the sound of the rain. We ate in the loft, simple food one of his men would bring in unmarked bags. We sat at a long, concrete table, often in silence, but the silence began to feel less like a void and more like a shared territory. On the 3rd night, one of his men came up the stairs behind me as I was looking out the massive window at the city. He did not mean to startle me. He He just needed to ask Soren a question about a shipment. He put a hand on my elbow to get my attention. I did not scream. I imploded. I dropped the glass of water I was holding. It shattered on the concrete, and I threw myself against the wall, my hands up, my heart trying to escape my chest, a choked gasp trapped in my throat. The guard froze, horrified. "Miss March, I'm sorry, Do not touch her." Soren's voice was not loud. It was a blade. "Ever. Go." The man vanished, his footsteps heavy on the metal stairs. I was left shaking, sliding down the wall, angry at my own violent reaction. Soren kept his distance, lingering near the counter on the far side of the room. "End of the line," he said. I looked up, confused, my pulse hammering. "In the convenience store, Gidiri." He clarified. "When you hid behind me, you did not touch my skin. You grabbed the coat." I nodded, wiping my face, trying to force the tremors to stop. I do not like to be touched, unexpectedly. It feels like being trapped, like the walls are moving in. He nodded slowly. "A boundary." "Yes," I whispered. He was quiet for a long moment, looking at the rain-streaked glass. "I do not like whistling," he said. The admission was so sudden, so human, it stopped my shaking. "Whistling. It is an inefficient sound. But mostly," he continued, his voice going flat, losing its velvet edge, "it reminds me of the Orchid Station bombing. The construction foreman was whistling, a high, thin tune, right before the main charge went off. It was the last sound I heard before the explosion." He stated it like a fact, but it was a confession. It was the first piece of himself he had offered. He had taken off the ring, walked barefoot, and now this. He was showing me the blueprints of his own fractures. The storm that had been threatening North Cross finally broke on the fourth night. The wind howled, rattling the huge glass panes above us. Then, with a loud pop and a mechanical groan, the floodlights died. The entire warehouse plunged into absolute, suffocating blackness. My breath caught. "Soren, I am here." His voice was calm, right where it had been. A moment later, I heard the scrape of a match. A small flame flared, casting huge, dancing shadows across the concrete walls. He lit an old oil lamp on the counter, the kind I had only seen in antique stores. He lit another and a third. The loft was filled with a warm, golden, unsteady light. It was softer than the harsh electric floods. It painted the concrete in hues of honey and amber. He was standing by the counter, rolling his sleeves up, the ones he had rolled down for dinner. The lamplight caught his hands. I had noticed his hands before, but not like this. They were not the soft, manicured hands of a CEO. They were calloused. The skin on his palms was thick, the knuckles slightly scarred. These were the hands of a man who had worked hard before he had ascended to this throne of shadows and steel. "You did not always wear a suit," I said. It was not a question. He looked at his own hands, as if surprised to see them. "No." He traced one of the calluses with his thumb. "My mentor, Matteo Arkel, believed you could not rebuild a city unless you knew how to lay the bricks yourself." He was quiet, lost in the memory, his sharp face softened by the golden light. "Who was he?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Matteo. He was the one who started the redevelopment trust. He saw the rot in the syndicate, the old way of doing things, the violence, the extortion. He called it lazy. He believed the only real power was permanent power, foundations, infrastructure. He wanted to wash the organization clean by turning it into a legitimate construction empire. He picked up one of the lamps, its light illuminating the scar on his neck as he moved. He was a fool. In some ways, he thought you could just ask predators to stop being predators. What happened to him? Orchid Station, Soren said. His voice was dead. It was his flagship project, a new transit hub for the old quarter. It was meant to be his masterpiece, the proof that his way worked. But the old guard, the ones who liked the lazy way, saw it as a threat. They did not just want to stop him, they wanted to make an example. They planted the bombs. He looked out the dark window. at the city he was trying to tame. Matteo died in the blast. I was the one who pulled him out. I finally understood. The man in the convenience store. The one who enforced the rules of the queue. The man who had a landlord's car towed for an expired meter. When he was not a destroyer, he was a builder. And his power was not in chaos, it was in an iron-fisted, obsessive control of the rules. He was trying to finish the job his mentor started, but he was doing it with the cold, precise ruthlessness of the world that had killed him. The next morning, the secure, encrypted device he had given me buzzed. It was a message, forwarded through one of his men. It was from Mr. Henderson. Evie, I was too harsh. The jackals are gone. Acre's car is back. Let's just forget this. Drop the complaint with the labor board and you can have your full hours back, plus a raise, 10%. It was a lifeline, a way out, back to my old life, my tiny apartment, my paycheck-to-paycheck existence. It was the boundary I had been fighting for. I looked up. Soren was at the far end of the loft, on a call. He finished, walked over, and looked at the message on my screen. He read it without expression. I waited for him to tell me what to do, to forbid me from taking it, to tell me it was a trap. He did nothing. He just waited. Well, I finally asked, my voice tight. Well, what, Evie? Is it real? Is it a trap? What do I do? That, Soren said, his voice quiet but firm, is your choice. Your choice is your asset. I will not take it from you, and I will not let anyone else take it from you. But I will not make it for you. He was giving me the one thing no one else ever had real agency, the freedom to walk away. I looked at the message from Henderson, this small, pathetic olive branch from a man who was terrified, and I looked at this complex, dangerous man who had torn my life apart to save it. I deleted the message. I'm not going back, I said. A flicker of something relief, maybe passed through his eyes. So fast I almost missed it. Then get some sleep, he said. The storm is over. That night, I did not stay in the loft. I took a blanket down to the main floor. There was an old, wide leather sofa in what used to be the showroom, facing the front windows. I lay down, for the first time in as long as I could remember. I did not double-check the lock on the door. I did not wedge a chair under the knob. I just slept. The sound of the rain on the high glass roof was not a threat. It was a shield. It was a white noise machine, isolating me from the city, insulating me in this strange fortress of glass and steel. It was the most fragile, terrifying, and profound feeling of safety I had ever known. I woke up with the dawn. The rain had stopped. The warehouse was filled with a soft, gray morning light. Soren was gone, likely to one of his pre-dawn meetings. But on the drafting table where I worked, placed perfectly parallel to my T-square, was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper. It was not a note, it was a sentence, written in a strong, clear, architectural script. Light defines space just as boundaries define a person. We are going out, Soren said. It was the 6th day. He did not look up from the blueprints he was studying, the ones for the Orchid Homes project, the affordable housing complex he planned to build on the ruins of the station. Out where I thought I was a liability. You are, he said, finally raising his eyes, but tonight you are a strategic asset. The North Cross Redevelopment Trust is holding its annual fundraising gala. I need you there. Why, to hold a cocktail napkin? To see, he said, the people who fund this city, the ones who pull the strings, the ones who are allied with the harbor jackals, and the ones who are allied with me, they will all be in one room. I need your eyes. You see things I do not. You see the lines, the architecture of a room. I need you to watch. A few hours later, a dress was delivered. It was not in a fancy box. It was in a simple garment bag. When I pulled it out, it was a column of minimalist black silk. No sequins, no lace, just perfect, severe lines. It fit as if it had been tailored from my own skin, a rush job he must have ordered the moment he decided. When I walked down the spiral stairs, he was waiting, and he was in a black suit, Not a tuxedo, but the cut was so precise it looked more formal than any tux. He was not wearing the ring. He looked at me. His face was, as usual, impossible to read, but his gaze lingered, tracing the line of the dress from my shoulder to the floor. "It will suffice," he said, which from him was high praise. The gala was in a massive, glass-walled ballroom on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper, a neutral territory he did not own but clearly influenced. The room was humming with the sound of a string quartet and the high-pitched, brittle laughter of North Cross's elite. And the 11 were there. I saw them immediately, not in suits but in the black uniforms of event staff. One was behind the bar, polishing a glass with lethal focus. 2 were flanking the main entrance, disguised as security. Another was passing with a tray of champagne. They were invisible, and they were everywhere. They were the building's hidden structure. Soren put his hand on the small of my back. It was the first time he had touched me with such casual possession. The heat of his palm was a shock, a sudden anchor. "Stay with me." We moved through the room. People turned. They smiled at Soren, their eyes full of forced warmth and calculation. Then their gaze would slide to me. I was the unknown variable. They would look me over, dismiss me as just another woman, and then they would look again. I was not one of them, but I was not intimidated. I was not a waitress tonight. I was not the girl in the convenience store. I was a sketch, an architectural drawing, and I had been rendered in silk. I met their gazes. My posture was straight, my chin up. I felt an unexpected, cold surge of confidence. I was a guest in this cage, not a permanent resident. After an hour of polite handshakes and meaningless conversations with men whose smiles never reached their eyes, the air in the room felt too thick, too hot. "I need some air," I whispered to Soren. He nodded, already guiding me toward a set of glass doors. The terrace. We stepped out. The night was cold, but the air was clean. The sound of the party faded to a dull murmur. Below us, North Cross was a sprawling map of lights, a glittering, beautiful lie. The wind was sharp, pulling strands of my hair from the simple knot I had put it in. I walked to the glass railing, breathing in the cold. I felt him stop behind me. He did not crowd me. He did not touch me. He stood exactly one step back, respecting the boundary I had drawn days ago in the loft. He was giving me the space. He was letting me decide the distance. I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. The man was a walking contradiction, a creature of absolute control who continuously offered me absolute choice. I turned around to face him. The city lights haloed him, catching the silver of his scar, the sharp cut of his suit. I was the one who moved first. I was the one who closed the small space between us. I lifted my hand slowly and laid my fingers lightly on his wrist, just above his cuff. I was not grabbing him. I was just checking. Beneath my fingertips, his pulse was a steady, strong metronome, thump, 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 calm, assured. It was the most reassuring sensation I had felt in my entire life. It was an anchor in the middle of the sky. He looked down at my hand on his wrist, then back to my face. "You are obsessed with sound," I said, my voice quiet. "Just for us." He did not seem surprised. Orchid Station, before the explosion. The sound was wrong, the acoustics. Too much echo in the main vault. I told Matteo the pressure was off, but he trusted the specs. His voice was low, rough with a memory. "Now, I listen. I listen to the rhythm of a room before I enter it. I listen to the sound a car door makes. I listen for the flaw in the sound. I am obsessed with lines," I said, my own confession coming just as quietly. The abandoned drawings. It is not just about the buildings I did not get to design. It is, when I look at them, I see a future that I failed, a line that just stopped. It makes me feel weak. "You are not weak, Evie," he said. His voice was certain. "You are just unfinished." We stood there, the honesty of it settling between us. A new boundary, a new territory. "Soren B.," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The rules, my fear, your fear, and the right to say stop, at any time. At any time, he agreed, his eyes holding mine. That is the foundation. The kiss did not happen all at once. It was a slow negotiation. It started with his eyes, which moved from my eyes to my mouth and back, a silent question. My answer was in my breath, which I let out slowly, my body not pulling away, not tensing. He lifted his hand, the one with the calluses. He did not touch my face, not my skin. He grazed the back of his fingers along my jawline, a feather-light touch, asking again. I leaned into it, just a fraction of an inch. Yes. His other hand came to rest on my upper back, just between my shoulder blades, the warmth of his palm soaked through the silk. It was not a grip. It was not a pull. It was support. It was a piece of architecture, a buttress, promising I would not fall. I breathed in. He smelled of wool, clean air, and that faint, sharp scent of mint. He lowered his head. I rose on my toes just slightly. His lips touched mine. It was not a collision. It was a connection. It was warm, and it was firm, and it was devastatingly gentle. There was no pressure, no demand. It was a statement. I am here. I felt the steady thump of his heart, or maybe it was mine, the rhythm echoing through my whole frame. My hand, which was still on his wrist, tightened. My other hand came up, not knowing what to do, and my fingers curled into the sharp, expensive fabric of his suit jacket, gripping the lapel. I was not pulling him closer. I was holding on. He deepened the kiss then, but it was still slow, still a question. It was a long, unfolding exploration. It was heat without fire. It was the taste of mint and the clean, cold air and the silent consensus that this was real. When we finally broke apart, we did not move. We stayed where we were, my hand on his lapel, his on my back, our foreheads resting together. The city lights blurred behind my closed eyelids. We just breathed, our rhythms slowly sinking, a silent agreement passing between us in the cold night air. We should go back inside, he said, his voice rougher, deeper than before. I know. He pulled back, just enough to look at me. He did not smile. He just looked, his gaze intense, as if he was memorizing my face. We walked back into the ballroom. The air between us was electric, a new, invisible line drawn. A councilman I recognized from the papers, a slick man with a politician's smile, approached us. "Soren, good to see you," the man boomed, his eyes flicking to me. "And this is—" Soren's hand was on my back again, a solid, declarative presence. "Councilman Davies," Soren said, his voice clear and carrying. "This is Evie March. She's our temporary design consultant for the Orchid Homes project." I stopped breathing. It was not my friend. It was not my date. He had not hidden me. He had taken my past, my abandoned dream of architecture, and he had given it a name. He had given me a public identity. He had placed me inside the walls of his legitimate life. The councilman's smile widened. "A pleasure, Miss March. An architect, that is a fascinating field." Before I could answer, I saw it. Across the room, in a shadowed alcove behind the string quartet, something glinted. It was not a camera flash. It was the curved reflection of the chandelier on a long camera lens. My body went cold. A man I did not recognize, dressed as a waiter, was holding the camera. He was not aiming at the councilman. He was aiming at me, at Soren. He lowered the camera, his eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second. He turned, and blending perfectly with the staff, disappeared through a service door. The storm hasn't passed yet. It's just found its eye, and I'm standing right in the middle of it. The moment we returned to the glass lantern, the warmth of the terrace, the ghost of that kiss, evaporated. The reality of the camera lens settled on me like a shroud. "He was a waiter," I said, pacing the concrete floor of the loft. But he was not. His shoes were wrong. They were handmade leather, not standard issue. "I saw him," Soren said. "He was standing at the console, his back to me. The team is running his image now. I tried to scrub the feeling of being watched, of being captured, from my skin. I went to the small workbench I had set up, cluttered with my drawings and pieces of scrap glass I had been toying with. I picked up a small, teardrop-shaped pendant I had cut from a sheet of cobalt blue glass. I had been smoothing its edges, thinking of hanging it in the window. I ran my thumb over its surface, a nervous habit, and I felt it. A flaw, a tiny raised bump near the bottom edge. I held it up to the light. It was not a bubble in the glass. It was something on the glass. I grabbed a jeweler's loupe from the workbench and looked closer. My blood stopped. It was a microcircuit, a dark, impossibly small square, no bigger than a grain of sand, with hair-thin metallic legs fused to the glass. It was not a flaw. It was a bug. Soren, my voice was a croak. He was at my side in an instant. I handed him the loupe and the pendant. He studied it for a long, silent minute. His face became granite. "This is high-level technology," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Military grade. Where did you get this?" I cut it myself, from a sheet of glass downstairs. The sheet has been here for years." "Then the sheet was compromised," he said. "No," I insisted, my mind racing. "I cut this 3 days ago. I left it here on this bench last night before we went to the gala. And, my other things, my drawings, they are moved." I pointed. "My T-square. I always leave it parallel to the edge of the table. It is at an angle. Someone was here. Someone was in this loft while we were gone." One of his men, the one who stayed behind, had been on the ground floor. He would not have seen anyone enter the loft from the roof access. Soren's jaw tightened. "They swapped it," he whispered. "They took your original piece and replaced it with this." He held the pendant up to the light. "A transmitter. They have been listening to us for at least 12 hours. He placed the pendant in a small, copper-lined box and handed it to one of his men, who had appeared silently at the top of the stairs. "Give this to forensics. I want a full breakdown. Signal strength, battery life, and origin. Now. And sweep this entire building." We waited. The loft, which had become my sanctuary, now felt violated, its cold concrete walls suddenly hostile. The next 2 hours were a blur of quiet, efficient men in dark suits, running scanners over every surface, checking every outlet, dismantling and reassembling every piece of electronics in the building. Finally, the report came back on Soren's encrypted tablet. "The device is a Frit bait tag," he said, reading from the screen. His voice was laced with ice. "Federal Revenue Integrity Task Force, the same agency that is investigating my trust. They use them to track high-value assets they do not want to arrest yet." "So Frit is dirty," I said. "Not necessarily. This is the part that is interesting." He tapped the screen. "The serial number. It is non-standard. It does not exist in any federal inventory. This is an off-books device. It is Frit technology, but leaked, stolen, or used by someone on the inside for a private game." He swiped to another screen. A grainy image appeared. The man from the gala. The waiter with the camera. "Huxley Prine," Soren said. "He's listed as a senior financial consultant for the FRIT's North Cross division. On paper, he is their top auditor." "And off paper," Soren said, his eyes narrowing. "He is a broker. He plays both sides. My intelligence shows him taking payments from the same shell corporations that fund the Harbor Jackals. He's using his federal badge to give them cover, and in exchange, they give him muscle and a cut of their action." Prine was the ghost, the man pulling the strings of the fake MOCD, using his real Frit credentials to leak information and point his own agency at Soren, his rival. "So he planted the bug." I said. "He wanted to hear our plans." "He wanted to hear more than that." Soren's gaze was heavy. "He would be listening for account numbers, transfer routes, offshore entities. He's not just trying to get me arrested, he's trying to find my money. This is a shakedown, using the full power of a federal agency as a weapon." The room was silent as I processed the layers, the Jackals, Henderson, the fake MOCD, the real Frit, and now Huxley Prine, the man at the center of the web. But one piece was missing. How did he get in here? Soren, I asked. This place is a fortress. How did he know which piece of glass was mine? How did he know where to find me? How did he know about me? Soren's face was unreadable. He walked to the console and pulled up another file. It was a personnel file. For Huxley Prine, he scrolled down, past Prine's education, his work history, to a list of known associates and financial partners, and I saw the name, Victor Halden. I do not understand, I whispered, but my body understood. The blood had already drained from my face, leaving my skin cold and tight. That cannot be. He's listed as a junior accountant on Prine's shadow ledger, Soren said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, a clinical diagnosis, a consultant for his private, non-FRIT-related projects. He has been working for Prine for 6 months. Victor Halden, my stepfather, the man who had married my mother, bled her dry of what little money she had, and then vanished 5 years ago. The man whose gambling debts and small-time cons had been the reason I had to drop out of school in the first place. He had not just vanished. He had found a bigger shark to swim with. He planted it, I said. The words tasted like poison. He's the only one who could have... He knew I used to cut glass. He knew my drawings. He must have described me to Prine, described my habits. He told them what to look for. My own family, my fractured, broken, pathetic past. It was not just a weight I had to carry. It was a weapon that was now being aimed directly at my head. I was not a pawn. I was the bait, and my own stepfather had set the hook. I sank onto the concrete bench, the world tilting. Prine was using Victor to get to me, and using me to get to Soren, a perfect 3-cushion shot. Soren watched me, his face a mask of cold fury. He made a call on his secure line. I want Victor Halden. Find him. Bring him to me. He hung up. What are you going to do? I asked, my voice shaking. I am going to end this, he said. The Belanti method. I will take him out of the equation. Prine will lose his inside man, and I will get the leverage I need. It is clean. Clean. I stood up, the ice in my veins turning to fire. You call that clean? He is a pathetic, weak man, but he is my family. You will not silence him. He put a federal transmitter on you. Evie, he delivered you to Prine, and Prine delivered you to the jackals. He sold you that boundary, Soren said, his voice dropping, cannot be uncrossed. I do not care, I was shouting now, pacing the floor. This is not your world of silent extractions. You cannot just make people disappear. There is a law. The law, he shot back, his own control cracking for the first time. The law is Huxley Prine. The law is a corrupt auditor using a federal badge to run a protection racket. There is no legal path here. There is only his way, or my way. Then we make a new one, I yelled. We find a third way. You want to beat him. You do not drag him into your darkness. You drag him into the light, even if the light is broken. It is the only way. We stood there, stalemated, breathing hard in the violated quiet of the loft. The moral lines were drawn. His, a hard line of quick, dark pragmatism. Mine, a desperate, perhaps naive, belief in structure. He finally looked away, running a hand over his face. There is no light. Evie. Not in this. Then we make it, I insisted, my voice softer now, my mind racing, the architectural part of my brain taking over. We do not let them choose the territory. We choose it, we build it. He looked at me, a new, sharp interest in his eyes. What do you mean? Prine wants your money, and he wants to see your books. The jackals want me, so we give them both. We set a meeting, but we do it on our terms, in a place we control. Where? Soren asked. I thought of the man who had died there, the man who had started all this. I thought of the place that haunted Soren, the place he was trying to exorcise by rebuilding it. Orchid Station, I said. Soren went perfectly still. It is a collapsed shell. It is a tomb. No, I said, walking over to my drafting table. my hands suddenly steady. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. It is a machine. It is a structure of steel and concrete and tunnels, and it is a place of memory. Your memory. That gives us the advantage. I picked up the charcoal pencil. Prine thinks he is meeting you in a dark, abandoned ruin. He thinks he will have the advantage of chaos, but he will not. My hand started to move, the lines sharp and clean on the paper. He will be meeting me. I will map the tunnels, I said, the design blooming in my mind. I will map every sightline, every echo, every place a light can be hung. He's not walking into a ruin. He's walking into a trap that I am going to design. He's walking into a matrix of light and shadow. And you and I, we are going to be the architects. For 3 days, Orchid Station became my studio. It was not a tomb, it was a machine. Soren provided a 4-man tech team, shadows who moved with silent, calibrated efficiency. They were my hands. I was their architect. Prine is a surveillance man, I told them, my voice echoing in the massive, collapsed central hall. I unrolled my blueprints, not the originals, but my new ones, my design on the hood of a rusted maintenance car. He will not come in blind. He will have thermal, audio, and long-range visual. He will set up Overwatch on that collapsed mezzanine. He thinks he controls the space before he even enters it. So, I said, pointing to a dark service tunnel, we give him a false space to watch. We spent the first day rigging the tunnels. I had them install panels of polished aluminum, salvaged from the station's ruined diner. We angled them at exactly 45 degrees, deep in the shadows, invisible from the main hall. His cameras will be up there, I explained, sketching on a dusty girder with a piece of chalk. The ambient light from the street. Even in the rain will hit our panels. The reflection will bounce back to his cameras, making the service tunnel look like a solid wall of collapsed concrete. He will see a dead end. I stepped back. But behind that reflection, we will have a clear passage. We are building false windows, optical illusions. We are bending the light. We will move where he thinks there are only walls. While I designed the set, Soren redesigned his men. In the vast open cavern of the glass lantern, he ran the 11 through drills. It was not sparring, it was a terrifyingly quiet choreography. He called it the phalanx, a fluid, mobile defense. They broke into 3 units that moved as one. 2 men were the soft shields in carrying lightweight, flexible screens made of a woven fiber that could stop a blade or a close-range round. 3 were the grips, their hands bare, their movements focused on joint locks, restraints, and disarms. The other 6 were the points, a rotating perimeter, always in motion, their job to apply pressure and redirect momentum. It was a dance of urban suppression. No firearms were visible, no intimidation, just presence. It was the convenience store. Perfected. It was the absolute, non-lethal control of a space, and it was far more frightening than a gun. Soren, meanwhile, prepared the Black Ledger. It was a masterpiece of disinformation, a ghost file, a digital ledger on a hard drive, detailing millions in cash, all flowing through the development trust. It was exactly what Prine wanted to see, but every account number was a dead end. Every transaction route, when traced, led back to Prine's own offshore shells. It was a mirror. My role was stage manager. My vehicle was a heavy, anonymous box truck from the glass lantern fleet, ostensibly loaded with panes of glass for a construction site. But behind a false wall of crated glass, I had my tools 3 high-powered, battery-operated theatrical spotlights and 2 industrial cold fog machines, the kind that use carbon dioxide to create a heavy, dense mist that clung to the floor. Prine will use thermal scanners. I explained to Soren as I checked the CO2 canisters. He will be looking for heat signatures, 11 men in a cold tunnel. But this fog will flood the main hall, equalizing the ambient temperature at ground level. His thermal will be useless. He will be as blind as we want him to be. We were moving the fog machines from a suburban art depot, a secondary storage site for the glass lantern. Soren was with me, in the passenger seat of the box truck. His presence was a heavy, silent weight, his tension a low hum in the cabin. The ambush was perfect. A black cargo van shot out of a side street, cutting us off at the depot gate. I slammed on the brakes, the truck groaning. I looked in my mirror. Another van had sealed the alley behind us. A classic pincer movement. Harbor jackals. Soren's hand went to the inside of his jacket, where I knew he carried nothing. But it was an instinct. "Stay down," he said, his voice a low growl. "No," I said. My heart was not hammering. It was cold and steady. My eyes were fixed on the small, convex mirror on the passenger side, the blind spot mirror. To our right was a gap, an impossible gap, a narrow, dark space between two massive 40-foot shipping containers that formed the depot's fence line. It could not have been more than 9 feet wide. Our truck was 8.5. "They are expecting us to go forward, into the van," I said, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. "They are not expecting us to go sideways." Soren looked at the gap. He looked at me, my foot hovering over the accelerator. He did not say, "You cannot do it." He just asked, "Can you?" I did not answer. I slammed the truck's gear shift into reverse. The engine roared. Soren's hand shot out, grabbing the dashboard to brace himself. "Evie!" "Shut up and watch your mirror," I yelled. I was not looking over my shoulder. I was staring, cross-eyed, at my 2 side view mirrors, the flat one for distance, the convex one for the lines. They were my compasses. I floored the accelerator. The truck leaped backward. The sound was a deafening, metallic scream. The left mirror maybe 6 inches of clearance. The right, the metal side of the truck, was scraping, tearing along the container's corrugated steel. Sparks flew. The noise was like a bomb. The jackals in the van behind us just stared, their mouths open, as a 20-ton truck shot past them, backward. I spun the wheel hard, reverse bootlegging the heavy truck in a perfect screeching arc. The back corner of the truck smashed through the chain-link fence, tearing it from its posts. We were on the access road. I slammed the gear into drive and hit the gas, leaving them trapped in their own ambush. I drove for 2 full blocks before I stopped, the engine idling, my entire body vibrating like a tuning fork. The adrenaline was a song in my veins. Soren was perfectly still in the passenger seat. He slowly, deliberately, straightened the lapel of his suit jacket. He looked at the side view mirror, which was now hanging by a single wire. He turned to me. There was no trace of fear in his eyes, only a new, sharp, calculating respect. He was not looking at a victim. He was not looking at the woman he had kissed. He was looking at a co-conspirator. "A new lane," he said. The corner of his mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile. "You drive well." That night, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and it was the piece I had been dreading. One of his intel men, the one who specialized in deep background, delivered a file. "We found the link, sir," the man said, his eyes avoiding mine. "Prine did not just find Victor Halden. He was a gift." Soren read the report, his face turning to stone. "What is it?" I asked. He looked at me, his gaze heavy. "The broker, the one who connected your stepfather to Prine's shadow accounting. It was the same man who managed the Alumni Scholarship Fund at North Cross Architectural." I did not understand. "What?" "Evie," Soren said, his voice painfully gentle. "Victor did not just gamble away your tuition money. He sold you. Years ago. He sold your entire portfolio, your original designs for the waterfront project, to this broker. The broker gave them to another, wealthier student." The air left my lungs. "You did not lose your scholarship because of your debt." Soren continued, his voice cold as steel. "You lost it because you were disqualified for academic dishonesty, for plagiarism of your own work. The weakness I had felt for years, the shame of failure, it was all a lie. It was a theft. My own stepfather had stolen my future, sold it for parts, long before he had planted that bug. I stood there, the foundation of my own past crumbling. Soren watched me absorb the blow. "Prine has him," he said, his voice hard. "He will be at the exchange. My original plan is still the cleanest. I can have him removed before the meeting. He will never be a threat to you again. No loose ends. No. The word was iron. It came from a place so deep and cold it surprised me. I looked up from the report, the pain solidifying into a hard, perfect rage. He's not a loose end. He's mine. He's mine to confront, not yours to clean. Sinitialize. We stood in the center of the loft, a new, final boundary between us. He is your family, Soren said. He is your wound. This, he said, his voice final, is your decision. In all things regarding him, you have the veto. He was handing me the power, a weight I had never asked for. But, he added, his eyes locking on mine, if he compromises the operation, if he chooses them over you at that station, I will do what is necessary. Fair, I said, but my rule stands too. If the plan goes sideways, if Prine has a variable we did not see, I give the abort order. Not you, me, my design, my call. He held my gaze for a long time. It was the ultimate test of his control. To give it away. Agreed, he said. At 10 p.m., the signal came. A secure message from Prine routed through 6 dead-end channels. The ledger. Midnight, tomorrow, Orchid Station, come alone. If I see anyone, the girl's father pays the price for your arrogance. A storm was moving in. The weather report promised heavy rain and wind, a perfect night. It is time, Soren said. We stood by the high glass windows, the city lights blurred by the first sheets of rain. No one else gets hurt, I said, making him swear the oath. No civilians, no matter what Prine or the jackals do. No one dies who is not in this game. That is not how my world works. Evie, it is how ours works, I insisted. Orchid Station was a tomb for Matteo Arkel because of chaos. We are using it as a stage, and on our stage, we control the script, we control the exits, and everyone who is not an actor goes home safe. He put his calloused hand over mine, the warmth sinking into my skin. No civilian casualties, he agreed, and if you give the order, we pull back. Your design, your rules. The call came 3 hours before midnight, on my secure device, a voice I had not heard in 5 years. Evie Littlebird, it is me, it is Victor. My blood pressure did not spike, it just stopped. How did you get this number? Prine gave it to me, as a courtesy, a last call type of thing. Please, Evie, I am not a bad man. I am a stray number. I got lost in his math. Meet me, alone, just for 10 minutes. He named Hallowed Steps, a small, rain-soaked park 2 blocks from the station. Soren was standing by the window. He had heard. I looked at him. It is a trap, he said, his voice flat. I know, I said, and I am going. Evie, this is a violation of the plan. It is a complication, I corrected him, and it is my veto. I need to see him. I need to look him in the eye. I will take 2 of your men as shadows, but I am going. He stared at me, the muscle in his jaw working. You have 5 minutes, then we extract. The park was empty, just slick black benches and skeletal trees. The rain was a cold, driving mist. Victor Halden was huddled under a dying oak, looking smaller, older, and infinitely more pathetic than I remembered. His coat was too thin. He looked like a man drowning on dry land. Evie, he said, his voice a wet rasp. He tried to hug me. I put a hand up, flat against his chest, a boundary. You look good, he said, his eyes darting around the park, looking for the shadows he knew must be there. He is taking care of you. Why, Victor, I asked, the scholarship, my designs. Why? He flinched. I needed the money. Evie, the broker, he said it was just business. He said your designs were good, too good. They would just sit in a drawer. He said this way, they would get built. And I had debts. You sold my future for gambling debts. I'm sorry, he hissed. Grabbing my arm, I recoiled from his touch. I'm sorry, but Prine, this man Prine, he's not like the others. He's a federal. He's all numbers. He does not forgive. He just deletes. You have to help me. The survivalist, the man who would chew off his own leg, or mine, to get out of a trap. I have a deal for you, I said, my voice as cold as the rain. Prine is bringing you to the station tonight as leverage. When this is over, he's going to be arrested. There is a clean team within Everett, the real feds, who are moving on him. They will want to talk to everyone involved. His eyes widened in terror. You give me everything you have, I said, my words precise, like surgical cuts. Every ledger, every note, every password for Prine's shadow accounts. You give it to me, right now, as insurance. In exchange, when the feds move in, I will ensure you are treated as a cooperating witness. I will guarantee your safety. That is the only deal. You walk away with your life. He did not hesitate. He was already reaching into his coat, pulling out a small, worn, leather-bound notebook and a thumb drive. Here. It is all here. Everything I kept. My insurance. Oh God, Evie, thank you. You are a good girl. You always were. He pushed the items into my hand. His own hands were clammy and trembling. You were right to come to me, I said. Do exactly as I say tonight, and you will be fine. He nodded, relief making him sloppy. Yes, of course. Anything you say. I turned and walked away, my two shadows falling in step behind me from the trees. I did not look back. I was halfway down the block when Soren's voice came through my earpiece. It was tight, colder than the grave. He just made a call. I stopped dead on the wet pavement. What? One of my men had a parabolic on him. The second you were out of sight, he called Prine. My stomach hollowed out. The transcript is coming to your device now, Soren said. He told Prine that you are afraid, that you are ready to flip. He told him you just offered to sell me out, in exchange for your father's immunity, a double cross. I looked down at the thumb drive in my hand. He had given me his insurance, only to immediately take out a new policy on me. So, Prine, Soren's voice continued, is now preparing for a triple cross. He's walking into that station believing you are on his side, that you are going to help him trap me. He's walking in arrogant. Your stepfather just gave us an advantage. Evie, an unintended one. I felt nothing, just a cold, clean certainty. The last piece of my old, weak life had just been cauterized. I am on my way, I said. When I got back to the glass lantern, the team was loading the box truck. Soren was standing apart, watching me, his face unreadable in the shadows. I walked straight up to him. You have the intel, he said. You know he betrayed you. You know Prine is walking in with a false sense of security. Yes. This changes the calculus, he said. Your father is not a victim. He's an active combatant, my promise of non-intervention. It is complicated. I know. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. There is another option. You gave me the veto. I am giving it back to you. We can abort. I can take this thumb drive, leak it to the Clean Frit team anonymously, and we can be on a plane to somewhere safe in an hour. You, me, and the 11. We let the light you wanted, the legal path, handle it. You never have to see your father again. I will stand out of the frame. You can be free of all of this. I looked at him. He was offering me the escape I had craved my entire life. No more fighting, no more fear, just an exit, an easy line. And I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest. It was not fear, it was loyalty. He was offering to sacrifice his entire war against Prine, to let his enemy win the board, just to give me peace. He was honoring his word, even when it cost him everything. That selfless trust was a bond stronger than any threat. No, I said, my voice clear and strong. He does not get to win. Not Victor, not Prine, you and I. We designed this. We built it. We are going to execute it. I shoved the thumb drive into my pocket. He thinks I am on his side. Good. I will use it. I will walk right up to him. He will think I am betraying you, right up until the moment the cage door shuts. Soren's eyes searched mine, looking for any crack, any hesitation. He found none. Get in the truck, Evie, he said, and the coldness in his voice was now aimed not at me, but at our enemy. Let us go build your cathedral." Midnight. The rain at Orchid Station was a deluge. It hammered the broken concrete and poured in sheets through the caved-in roof. It was a perfect cleansing noise. The 11 entered first, moving through the service tunnels like smoke. Soren and I followed, setting up in a ruined ticket booth that I had designated as my control room. I jacked my laptop into a battery pack and brought up my system. "Showtime," I whispered. I hit the first macro. High above, the theatrical spotlights I had hidden in the steel girders snapped on, but they did not illuminate the room. They hit my angled aluminum panels. The main hall of the station was suddenly a mind-bending maze of reflections. Light bounced at impossible angles. Tunnels that were there vanished. Walls that were not appeared. It was a cathedral of broken glass, just as I had planned. "They are at the north entrance." Soren's earpiece crackled. I looked at my feed. Prine's Overwatch, just as I predicted, was set up on the mezzanine, but his camera was pointed at a solid wall of reflected light. He was blind. Prine, Victor, and 4 harbor jackals stepped into the hall. The jackals were jumpy, their hands on knives. Unused to this kind of psychological warfare, Victor looked terrified. Prine, however, was smiling. He was arrogant. He thought he was in control. "Soren!" Prine yelled, his voice echoing weirdly off my panels. "I know you are here. I have your father-in-law, and I have your new consultant, who, by the way, is much smarter than you are." "Stay here," I told Soren. I stepped out of the booth into the rain, my hands empty. "I am here, Prine and Victor." Victor's head snapped toward me. "Evie, he is here. Soren is here, in the dark," he shouted, playing his part. "I know he is," I called back. "I brought him, just like I promised." Prine's smile widened. This was it. The moment of his victory. "Good girl. Now tell your boss to come out with the ledger, or your father gets a new scar." One of the jackals put a knife to Victor's throat. Victor whimpered. "He's not my boss," I said, walking slowly toward them. "He is my partner, and he is right here." On cue, Soren stepped out of the shadows, flanked by 2 of his men. He was holding a single, slim hard drive. "Prine," Soren said, his voice calm. "The ledger," Prine demanded, giddy. "Give it to me, and we let your new architect go. A fair trade, business." "Victor," I called out, "get away from him. Now, come to me." Victor looked at Prine, at the knife, at me. He was frozen. "Come on, Victor," I shouted. "The deal is done. I got you immunity. Get over here." This was the pivot. Prine, believing I was with him, sneered. "Go on, Victor, run to your daughter. Your part is done." The jackal pulled the knife away. Victor scrambled, half sobbing, slipping on the wet concrete, running toward me. The instant Victor crossed an invisible line I had marked on the floor, I spoke into my mic. "Now." Soren tossed the hard drive. It spun through the air, landing at Prine's feet. At the same time, I grabbed Victor, pulling him behind me as the phalanx, all 11, materialized from the reflections. The soft shield snapped open, creating a wall between us and them. The grips and points formed a perfect, silent semicircle. Prine laughed, bending to pick up the drive. "You fool! You really think—" He stopped. He had not heard the sound. I had the sound of boots on gravel, outside the tunnel. I hit the final macro. The spotlights on the girders all snapped off. The hall plunged into darkness. And then, a single, brilliant white beam my center spotlight snapped on. It was not aimed at us. It was aimed directly at Prine. He was illuminated, caught like a terrified stage actor, his hand on the drive, surrounded by 4 knife-wielding jackals. He realized, too late, what I had done. The light was not for us. It was a target designation. Prine, a new voice boomed from the north entrance, amplified by a bullhorn. "This is Federal Agent Kincaid with the Revenue Integrity Task Force. You are surrounded. Drop the drive. Put your hands in the air." Prine stared into the darkness, at the silhouettes of a dozen armed federal agents, the real frit funneling into the tunnel mouth. their weapons trained on the only thing in the entire station they could see. Him. He looked at me, his face a mask of disbelief and pure hatred. He had not been walking into a trap set by Soren. He had been walking into a stage I had designed, and I had just given him the spotlight. The world was a single, blinding white spotlight. Prine, trapped in the beam, looked like a demon caught in holy water. He did not surrender. He snarled. Now he roared to the jackals. It was a desperate, suicidal move. One of the jackals, the one closest to the tunnel wall, did not pull a knife. He pulled a pin. He threw a canister, not at the feds, but at our feet. It exploded with a sickening, wet pop. It was not flashbang, it was smoke. A thick, acrid, yellow-green cloud erupted, boiling from the floor. Chlorine. Gas, the Fed commander shouted. Masks on move. But the smoke was faster than their orders. In 5 seconds, the entire hall was gone, swallowed in a toxic, suffocating fog that burned my eyes and lungs. My beautiful, precise matrix of light was smothered. The spotlights became useless, diffused into a murky, greenish hell. Chaos. Shouts, the sound of boots slipping on wet concrete. Evie Phalanx, to me! Soren's voice was a roar, cutting through the panic. But I was not looking for Soren. I was looking for Victor. Through the stinging blur, I saw him. He was not running toward the feds. He was not running toward us. He was running away, scrambling sideways toward the darkest, most unstable part of the station, the section I had explicitly marked in red on my blueprints. He was running toward the collapsed dome. Victor, no! I screamed, my voice tearing in my raw throat. It is unstable. The floor is out. He did not listen. He just ran, a silhouette of pure animal panic, disappearing into the thickest part of the smoke. I ran after him. Evie, stop. Soren's command was absolute. It was the voice that stopped armies. I ignored it. I plunged into the yellow cloud. I heard Soren swear, a low, vicious sound, and then I heard his heavy, pounding footsteps right behind me, chasing the man he had promised not to touch. He had yelled, stop, but he was following me. In the critical moment, he had not chosen the mission. He had not chosen his own safety. He had chosen me. I burst through the smoke cloud into a pocket of clearer air. We were under the dome, or what was left of it. It was a skeleton of rust-red steel, open to the night. The rain poured in, not as a mist, but as a waterfall, acting like a curtain, holding back the worst of the chlorine. The floor here was not concrete. It was a treacherous mosaic of broken tile and rotted-out rebar, slick with moss and water. High above, the wind howled through the steel frame, the vibration, or maybe the distant thump of the feds deploying non-lethal rounds, shook the structure. A shower of debris rained down, not just dust, shards of the original stained glass, which had been clinging to the frame for years, finally let go. They fell like a storm of lethal, glittering stars, red, blue, and poisoned green, lit by the flashing emergency lights from the tunnel. Victor, I screamed. He was 10 feet ahead, clawing at a rusted service door that had been welded shut decades ago. A dead end. Evie, get back! Soren was right behind me, his hand reaching for my arm. He will be cut to pieces. I lunged, grabbing the back of Victor's thin coat just as a wave of glass, thousands of tiny, sharp diamonds began to fall. Victor spun around, his eyes white with terror. They will kill me. They will not, I yelled, trying to drag him back. I slipped. My foot found no purchase on the slick tile. My ankle twisted. I went down, pulling him with me. We were exposed. The sound from above was a high-pitched, crystalline shriek as a larger panel of glass tore free. I did not have time to cover my head. A solid, heavy weight slammed into me. It was Soren. He did not just cover me. He enveloped me. He threw his body over both me and Victor, his arms a cage of steel, his broad back taking the full force of the glass storm. I heard the sound, a series of wet, heavy thunks and sharp slices as the shards hit his suit, his shoulders, his back. He did not make a sound. He just pressed his face into my hair, his body rigid, shielding us from the world. Then silence. The only sounds were the rain, the distant shouting, and the ragged, desperate sound of our breathing. We were in a pocket of impossible quiet. The world was reduced to the smell of chlorine, rain, and the warm, metallic scent of his blood. "Soren," I whispered. My voice was broken. He pushed himself up, just an inch, his weight still covering me, but allowing me to breathe. He was breathing hard, his breath hot against my temple. "Are you hit?" he rasped. "No," I managed. God, you... He looked down at me. His face was inches from mine. The flashing red and blue lights from the tunnel caught the rain on his skin and the intensity in his eyes. He was not looking at Victor, who was sobbing beneath us. He was looking only at me. The world was ending around us. The air burned. But in that moment, under the broken dome, we were the only two people alive. "If you want the dawn, Evie," he said, his voice a low, rough vow, "I will turn off all my dark lights. I will burn the entire syndicate to the ground for you. Just say the word." It was not a promise. It was an abdication. He was laying his entire world, his entire identity, at my feet, under a rain of broken glass. My hand, which was trapped between our chests, found his. I did not grab it. I just threaded my shaking fingers through his. His hand was steady, calloused, real. He lowered his head. I met him halfway. Our foreheads touched, pressed together. It was a different kind of kiss. A promise of equals. "No," I whispered, my breath mingling with his. "You do not burn. You build. That is the vow. You build. Soren, we build. Together." He closed his eyes, a single, shuddering breath escaping him. It was a surrender. His lips found mine. It was not gentle like the terrace. It was desperate. It was a treaty signed in the middle of a war zone. It was all the heat and fear and adrenaline of the night. All the promises of the last few days. Concentrated into one. Single point of contact. It was the taste of rain and smoke and his unshakable loyalty. His hand cradled the back of my head, his fingers spreading, holding me as if I were the only solid thing in a collapsing world. It was a kiss that sealed a new foundation, stopping just at the edge of that safe boundary, but burning with an intensity that left me breathless. "We have to go," he breathed against my mouth. "I know." I was the one who pulled back, the architect, the planner. "It is over." I raised my voice. "Victor, it is over." I pushed out from under Soren. He stood up, his back to me, facing the chaos. His suit was shredded across the shoulders, dark fabric stained darker with blood. "Kincaid," I shouted toward the tunnel, my voice clear and carrying. "This is March. Prine is disarmed. He is in the main hall. My team is pulling back. We are non-combatants." "Roger that." March G, the bullhorn called back. "We have Prine. We are moving in." Soren gave a sharp, two-fingered whistle. From the smoke, the phalanx emerged, materializing from the chaos. They formed their silent, moving corridor around us. No one spoke. They had seen Soren's back. They had seen his choice. They did not need orders. They just moved to protect the new center of their world. We began to move, a silent gray ghost, back toward the service tunnels. "Evie, wait." "Victor." He was on his feet. He was not looking at me with gratitude. He was looking past me, at a dark, flooded utility passage to our left, an escape. He made a break for it. Soren tensed, his instinct to move, to neutralize the threat, to end the loose end. "No," I commanded. I stepped out of the phalanx, directly into Victor's path. He ran right into me. I did not budge. The girl he had sold, the girl who used to flinch, was now a wall of cold, hard certainty. "You are not running," I said, my voice dead. "Evie, please, they will put me in jail," he whimpered, trying to get around me. Yes, they will, I said. You will be investigated, and you will cooperate, because that was our deal. I pulled the thumb drive and the notebook from my pocket. Or I will give them this, and I will tell them you were Prine's partner, not his victim. Your choice. Victor, the last one you get to make. He stared at the evidence in my hand. He looked at me, at the cold finality in my eyes. He looked at Soren, who was standing 5 feet away, his arms crossed, watching. Soren did not move. He did not speak. He did not lay a single hand on my stepfather. He was honoring my boundary, my legal path, even when his every instinct screamed to intervene. He was proving his vow. Victor slumped. The fight was gone. He was just a pathetic, wet old man. What do I do? He whispered. You walk, I said, to those agents. You put your hands up, and you tell them you have information for Agent Kincaid. You will be safe. You will not be free. As if on cue, the high, piercing wail of a fire alarm started up, triggered by the smoke. Red lights began to flash, painting the entire chaotic scene in rhythmic pulses of crimson. I turned back to Soren. He was watching me, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, they were full of a raw, exposed awe. He reached to his right pinky finger, to the spot where his ring usually sat. He seemed to realize it was not there, that it was in the brass tray back at the loft. No, he reached into his pocket. He had brought it. He pulled out the heavy, dark metal ring, the Belanti signet, the symbol of his power, his past, his entire organization. He did not put it on. He pressed it, heavy and still warm from his body, into the palm of my hand. My fingers closed around it. Hold this for me, Evie, he said, his voice low, just for me, over the scream of the alarm. Hold it, until I am worthy of it, until I have built something that deserves the woman who just did this. The fallout was immediate, and it was seismic. The clean branch of Frit, led by Agent Kincaid, moved with surgical precision. The next morning, every news feed in North Cross lit up. Huxley Prine was arrested, not just for corruption, but for leveraging a federal position to aid and abet the Harbour Jackals, who were now labeled a domestic racketeering enterprise. Belanti and Company, in a brilliant act of public transparency, voluntarily submitted the entire ledger of the Redevelopment Trust to Kincaid's team. The real ledger, the one I had seen, full of clean money, real projects, and audited accounts. They were lauded as a corporate victim, a model of civic cooperation. But the real change came 2 days later. Soren Belanti called a press conference at the ruins of Orchid Station. He stood in the rain, at a simple podium, the 11 men standing behind him, not as guards, but as witnesses. He did not just announce the Orchid Homes project, he announced the end of an era. The Belanti name, he said, his voice carrying over the crowd, has been associated with the shadows of North Cross for too long. My father's ways, my grandfather's ways, they were built on a foundation of fear, of lazy violence. Today, that foundation is broken. He announced the complete dissolution of the private security branches of his organization. He was cutting ties, publicly and permanently, with the darkness. All assets would be rerouted into the Redevelopment Trust and 2 new low-income housing funds. He was inviting independent, external auditors to oversee the entire process. He was going legitimate, completely. It was not a surrender. It was a reconstruction. My life changed, too. I did not go back to the diner. I did not stay hidden in the glass lantern. Soren offered me a job, not a symbolic one, but a real one. I became the community oversight supervisor for the Orchid Homes project. It was my architecture, my designs, my vision of bending light that would define the new space. I was tasked with ensuring the community's needs, their safety, and their boundaries were the foundation of the entire project. I was building on the wreckage of Matteo Arkel's dream and my own. I visited Victor one last time. He was at the Civic Holding Annex, a clean, sterile, minimum security facility for witnesses. He had signed his confession. He'd given the feds everything on Prine and the Jackals. He looked small and gray, but the frantic, survivalist terror was gone from his eyes. "They said, with my cooperation, I will be out in maybe 18 months, he said, not looking at me. "That is good, Victor." "Evie," he said, his voice quiet, "the scholarship. I never thought—" "I know," I said. "I was not there to forgive him. I was there to draw a line. You will serve your time. When you get out, you will leave North Cross. You will not contact me. You will not contact my brother. You will start a new life, a stray number in a new city. That is the deal." He looked at me, and for the first time, he saw me, not his little bird, not a pawn. He saw the architect. He nodded. "Okay, Evie, okay." I walked out of that building and never looked back. Even the 11 changed. They were not dark bodyguards anymore. Soren put them all through de-escalation training. They became the civil security force for the construction sites, managing logistics, protecting materials, and engaging with the community. Their phalanx, once a tool of silent intimidation, was now used to manage crowds at community feedback meetings. 6 months later, the site was unrecognizable. The ruined dome was gone, replaced by the rising skeleton of a new, beautiful structure, filled with light and open spaces. We were holding the groundbreaking ceremony. Hundreds of people were there, community leaders, politicians, the press, and the first families who had been approved for the new housing. Soren was at the microphone. He spoke of new foundations, of building, not destroying. His voice was warm, full of a hope I had never heard before. I was standing in the front row. He finished his speech, and the crowd applauded. He looked at me. His eyes were clear, steady. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the dark, heavy signet ring I had been holding for him. He had asked for it back that morning. He held it up, not for the crowd, but for me. He was about to speak, about to give it back to me, to ask me to hold it again, a public, symbolic gesture of his ongoing vow. And that is when the final thread of the old world tried to tear the new one apart. It was not a sound, it was a feeling, a low, sub-audible vibration I felt in my teeth, coming from under the grandstand, a high-pitched, electronic squeal, just at the edge of hearing. Soren, obsessed with sound, heard it too. His head snapped up, his eyes met mine. Panic, the remaining, leaderless remnants of the harbor jackals, a final, spiteful act, a sonic bomb designed not to explode, but to incapacitate, to destroy, to bring the old chaos back. There was no time to shout, no time for a bullhorn. I ran to the stage controls. I looked at the evacuation plan I had designed. I slammed my hand on the lighting board, killing the main lights and seizing manual control. I started to flash the stage lights. Dot, 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 dash, 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 dot, dot, dot. The Morse code for danger we had used at the station. The crowd panicked, a low murmur turning to a scream. The 11, now in their clean blue security uniforms, did not wait. They saw the signal. They deployed the phalanx, not as a weapon but as a shield. "This way, calmly move to the exits," they shouted, forming a moving barrier, protecting the elderly and the families with children, guiding the surge. Soren was already off the stage, running, not to me, but to the technical tunnel access under the grandstand. I ran after him. We plunged into the darkness, into the concrete guts of the new foundation. The vibration was stronger here, rattling my bones. "There," he shouted, pointing. It was a module, military grade, clamped to an old, thick utility cable, a relic of the original station. Still live. It was vibrating, a metal can of pure, compressed sound, moments from triggering. "I cannot disarm it," Soren said, his hands tracing its surface. "It is pressure sensitive. The bolts are rusted." "We do not have to," I said, my mind racing, my eyes scanning the architecture. "We have to stop the resonance." I looked at the main locking bolt, the one holding the module to the steel cable, vibrating so fast it was a blur. If that bolt shears, the entire frequency shifts. It will detonate. The bomb squad was on its way, but they were minutes out. We had seconds. Soren did not hesitate. He jammed his bare hands against the vibrating module. His body pressed against the concrete wall. His palms braced against the shearing bolt. His whole body shook. A low, agonized sound was torn from his throat as the vibration threatened to shatter his bones, but the bolt held. I looked around, frantic. No one could hear us. I grabbed a piece of reflective, polished steel from a worker's bench, a remnant of the new facade. I ran to the tunnel opening. I angled the steel, catching the flashing red lights of the emergency vehicles arriving outside. I started signaling. ... dash. And here we are in here. A bomb squad tech saw the reflection. Here in the tunnel. They were on us in seconds, a blur of heavy armor. "Sir, get your hands off!" "He is holding the bolt," I yelled. "It is stabilizing the frequency." The tech saw it. "He is right. Hold it, hold it." Soren's face was white, sweat and rain plastering his hair to his skull. His teeth clenched, blood trickling from his palms where the metal was cutting into him. But he held. The tech flooded the module with rapid-set stabilization foam. The vibration lessened, choked. The high-pitched squeal died with a pathetic whine. It was over. The knot was finally, truly untied. The last echo of Orchid Station was silent. The grandstand was safe. The crowd was safe. The emergency lights clicked off, replaced by the bright, steady illumination of the new stage lights. Soren was on his knees in the tunnel, breathing heavily, his hands raw and bleeding. I knelt in front of him. He looked up. He was exhausted, he was bleeding, and he was smiling. A real, actual smile. He reached into his pocket, his bloody hand trembling. He did not pull out the dark, heavy signet of his past. He pulled out a new ring, a simple, thin band of brushed steel. It is made from the old rails," he said, his voice rough, "from the Orchid Station, recycled, reforged." He held it out to me. He did not ask me to be his queen. He did not ask me to join his world. "Not to own Evie," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I had never heard. "To co-create, with me, to build, always." It was not a question of power. It was a question of partnership. I did not say yes. I just held out my left hand. He slid the ring onto my finger. It was cold from the steel and warm from his hand. It was a perfect, unbreakable circle. He stood, pulling me up with him. We walked out of the tunnel, onto the stage, into the bright, clear light. The crowd, seeing us, seeing that the danger was past, started to applaud. It started as a few scattered claps, then grew, a rising wave of sound, until the whole city seemed to be cheering. It sounded, I thought, like rain on a glass roof, washing the entire world clean. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to connect with you. So please comment below and let us know where in the world you are listening from and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. You can also support us by hitting the hype button, so this story can be heard by even more people.